All right, it is 6:30 and I want to welcome you all to Cooking with Plants. I'm Kelly Wilson, and tonight we are going to focus our time together on unique vegetables. It's the height of peak produce season here in Southeast Michigan where I live, and I love to focus classes this time of year on vegetables we might find at the farmer's market or in a CSA box that we might not know what to do with. So, this is a two-part series. We're going to focus on a couple different veggies tonight, and then next month in August, we'll revisit this same topic through the lens of a couple other unique vegetables. If you are new to joining us and you would like to have live captions on during this conversation, you can look on your screen for the three ellipses, those three dots where it says more. Hover over that, opens up a menu that will include a list that has language and speech options. Hover over that, and then you can click on the live captions option that pops up. If you have a question during class, I will do my very best to pay attention to the Q&A and answer any questions that come through there. Sometimes it doesn't populate as quickly as I would like, so I might not see your question until after class is over. If I did not answer your question during the class, I will send an email with the answer to the whole group so that your question does get answered. Please make sure that any question you put in the Q&A is relevant to the entire group and is relevant to our topic. And then if you don't get an email from me or you don't get your question answered in class, please always feel welcome to email lifestylemedicine@trinity-health.org, and we'll get you an answer. Promise. I want you to participate, so please use that Q&A function. Everyone is muted and your cameras are off because we are recording this class. We do that for privacy reasons and to make sure that we have a clean recording because many of you tune in to that recorded video. So like I said, my name is Kelly Wilson, and I have the pleasure of teaching this class. I am a registered dietitian and a certified lifestyle medicine practitioner, and I work in Southeast Michigan at Trinity Health Ann Arbor. Our practice, like I said, focuses on lifestyle medicine, and if you're not familiar with that, it's this evidence-based medical subspecialty that really focuses on disease prevention, treatment, and reversal through 6 pillars. A whole food, plant forward dietary pattern is one of those pillars, and that's the primary focus of this class series. But we also talk to patients about finding ways to move their body every day, avoiding risky substances, managing stress, getting restorative sleep, and connecting with other humans and the natural world. When it comes to this class, like I said, we're focused on that whole food, plant forward nutrition pillar. And I'm really excited because this class is designed to help translate the recommendations that we give to our patients and make it really easy for you to add plants to your meals in an approachable, budget-friendly way. I really believe anybody can cook, and this class is designed for anyone who is, new and just getting to know their kitchen to folks who've been cooking for years. Hopefully, there's something for everybody in all of these classes. I want to remind you that the recipes I share are always suggestions. So if there's an ingredient you don't have, something that you're allergic to, or you don't quite have a taste for it yet, there's more often than not substitutions. And if you have a hard time figuring out what those substitutions are after spending some time on the internet, you're welcome to email us and I can help you out. Also, if this is new, if this idea of whole food, plant forward eating is a new concept for you and you're just starting to dip your toes in, start small and be patient. Know that change takes time and that it's really about persistence over perfection. And a great place to start is with what you already love. If you're a taco fan and you typically eat like a ground beef as your taco filling, can you add some sauteed mushrooms or some cooked lentils to that meat? Or maybe you can take it a step further and swap out the meat for some black beans or some lentils seasoned with your taco seasoning. So start with what you love and then adapt and add some more of the beneficial plant foods from there. Okay, and again, focus on progress, not perfection. If you are a Trinity Health colleague and you're joining this class or you're watching the recording, you get 250 Live Your Whole Life points just for tuning in. You can email us at lifestylemedicine@trinity-health.org to get those points. I always like to remind folks that our classes, our time together, I'm providing general nutrition information. So if you have a specific health condition, what I'm sharing may or may not apply to you. Now, most people can add more plant-based foods to their diet without a problem. However, it's always a good idea, especially if you were newly diagnosed with a health condition, to talk to your physician and your registered dietitian to make sure that the changes you're making fit with your current health situation. And if you need help connecting to a physician or a registered dietitian, feel more than welcome to email us again at lifestylemedicine@trinity-health.org, and we'd be happy to get you connected. This is our class series. Oh, I didn't edit this slide, so we're not adding flavor today. We are all the way down to July. It's not May anymore. We are focused on unique vegetables, and then next month is gonna be part 2. We're gonna focus on unique vegetables, again with a few different recipes. So this is our class series. If you are joining us for the first time and you wanna watch the recordings of these previous classes, make sure you scan that QR code, register, make sure that you're registered, because I will send out an email that includes the class website and the links to the recordings where you can go back and watch previous classes. Tonight, we're talking about seasonal eating because it is peak produce season, like I said, here in Southeast Michigan, and we're gonna focus on 3 different vegetables. We're gonna work with collards and fennel primarily, but we do have a recipe that uses some kale. So we're thinking like cooking greens, and then fennel, which is an underappreciated vegetable that I think so many of us look at and think, oh, this is beautiful, but what do I do with it? So hopefully you'll have some ideas by the end of class. So let's talk a little bit about seasonal eating. This picture that you see on the screen is one of my favorite visuals because I think it really highlights the bounty of produce that's available here in Michigan. I know not everyone who's joining us is from Michigan, but because that's where I'm based, that's what I'm going to talk about, and then I'll give some ideas to those of you who aren't from here. But this chart, I think, really captures the fact that Michigan is the second most agriculturally diverse state in the country, which I think is phenomenal considering we have winter for 6 months of the year. So look at all these beautiful things that we can grow just in 6 months' time. These foods are a lot of these foods are at their peak this time of year, like July, August, September is peak produce season. And you can see that on the chart. A lot of the columns in July, August, September are full. Why I really love peak season produce is the flavor. If you go to a farmer's market or your local market and you get an in-season tomato, not the same as that tomato that you got from the grocery store in February. Very different flavor. So produce in season has a better flavor profile. Sometimes if you don't like the taste of a veggie that you get from the grocery store, you might find that you actually enjoy the flavor of something that is grown a little closer to home because it's picked at peak ripeness. And typically when it's picked at peak ripeness, it's not only more visually appealing, but the color is more vibrant, but it's going to be maybe a little bit sweeter. It's going to have more of those flavor compounds fully developed. Local food is also a really great way to develop a sense of place and connection to the changing seasons, and a really great way to build a sense of community. Often when we're purchasing local food, we're buying that direct from the person who grew that food, and it gives us an opportunity to get to know them, understand, who they are, and really have that face behind our food. So for me, local food is more than just nourishing our body, it's also about community. So if you want to find local food in Michigan, one of the best resources out there is Taste the Local Difference. localdifference.org is a searchable database that you can filter by county, by zip code, by town, and you can filter by different types of local food businesses, farms, farmers markets, etc. Michigan Farmers Market Association is also a great resource for finding farmers markets in your community. Nationally, so if you're our friends who are joining us from outside of Michigan, there is the National Farmers Market Coalition, which majority of farmers markets are a member of. So that's a great way to find farmers markets. And then there is a publication, a group that has a publication in almost every state called Edible Communities. That is another great print resource for finding local food options. Here in Michigan, we also have some options to connect you to local food with Trinity Health. So we have 3 farms across Michigan that are based at our three of our hospitals, our Ann Arbor Hospital, our Pontiac Hospital, and our Muskegon Hospital. And all 3 of these farms operate a farm share program, which is a subscription. So you get a weekly box of produce items in exchange for paying a subscription fee at the beginning of the year. They have shares available from April to December each year, and they grow some of the produce, but what's also really cool is they work with farms from across the region to aggregate foods into that box. So not only are they giving you delicious, fresh local produce, but they're supporting the whole local food ecosystem in the process of putting that box together. And they have full price options, but they also have reduced or no cost share options for folks who are experiencing food insecurity, and they do accept SNAP or food assistance benefits as well. So you can learn more about the farm at the website that's on the screen here, or if you just Google the farm at Trinity Health, it'll pop right up. Okay. So let's get cooking. We've got, I think, 4 different recipes that we're going to work through tonight. So I mentioned that we're going to focus primarily on collards, but I do want to talk about dark leafy greens, like cooking greens in general, because I think collards is the one that it seems like we get the most questions about, but a lot of folks also have questions about, Swiss chard, which is this bright, beautiful leaf. This is another example of Swiss chard, just in a different color. So these are 2 leaves of rainbow Swiss chard. Swiss chard comes in, there's white stemmed Swiss chard, yellow, orange, pink, red. It all tastes the same, but if you remember from other classes, each one of these colors, different phytochemicals that are contributing to our health and well-being. So eating the rainbow Swiss chard, you're eating the rainbow of phytonutrients. So that's kind of a fun, easy way to do it. Swiss chard, some people find this to have a little bit of a bitter flavor to it. So I really like cooking it with sauteed onions, garlic, and a little bit of citrus. If you remember from our flavor class, citrus can help balance out that bitter flavor. Adding some umami, so tomatoes, some sun-dried tomatoes in your chard saute adds a little bit of sweetness, which balances bitter, also adds umami, which balances bitter. So those are some ways you can do this. We're going to make a wrap later with collard leaves. You could use Swiss chard leaves as a wrap as well. So I'll remind you of that when we get there. So that's one dark leafy green. And then we've got kale. So this is a lacinato or a dinosaur kale, and it's similar applications to our curly leafed kale, but it is a little bit more tender than some of our other kale options. So lacinato kale, you can use it in all the same applications you would other kales. It's just a little bit more tender, so it cooks faster, and you don't have to cook it. You could eat it raw. It's not quite as tough and squeaky. And then finally, we've got our beautiful, giant collard green leaves. This is what we're going to be working with tonight. all of these dark leafy greens, from a nutrition perspective, we're getting a lot of magnesium, we're getting a lot of folate, which is really important for a process called methylation, which is key for detoxifying, helping our body's natural detoxification process, and for DNA repair and recovery. We're also getting a lot of vitamin K and carotenoids, which are important for our eyesight and have been linked to possibly reduce risks of breast cancer. Okay, so I'm a big fan of dark leafy greens, and hopefully this class gives you some ideas for how to incorporate them. So let's go to our very first recipe. We're going to work with collard greens, and let's see. We're going to do a little bit of cutting first. So I'm going to show you. I'll move my screen down here. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing my cutting board, and I've got my beautiful collard green leaves. We're doing a stewed collards, which I think is a very common application that folks are used to. If you've eaten collards, typically you have eaten them this way. So to get my collard leaf chopped, what I'm going to start with is laying it flat on my cutting board. Remember, when I'm working with a knife, I'm pinching it between my thumb and first finger, wrapping my finger around 3 other fingers around the handle like this. I'm going to take the tip of the chef's knife, and I'm going to cut out this woody stem. Okay, so that is going to go into my compost bucket. Okay, set that aside. I'm going to do that with another one over here. If you have really big collard leaves, sometimes these veins can also get really thick, and you might want to cut those out too. The reason we're cutting them out is that those are the stem, and those thick veins are really woody, and they take a really long time / never get tender. And this, by just focusing on the leaves, we're avoiding tough collard pieces. So I've stacked all my leaves in half, and now what I'm going to do is just kind of roll them. And because I want these to cook pretty quickly, I am going to thinly slice. So I've got the tip of my knife on the cutting board, and then I'm making this nice rocking motion as I'm thinly slicing. They're a little skinnier than the width of my pinky finger, going down this roll. Okay, so there I've got my collards cut. And now we are going to go over to our stovetop, and I'm going to turn the camera on there. So you should be seeing 2 images, and I'll spotlight both of those. Okay, so both of those images should be spotlight. You've got the stovetop here. Our big pot is where we're going. Turning this heat on high. I'm adding 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. And then I am adding, I've got 1 onion, small onion that was diced, and 1 clove of garlic that was minced. And we're going to let those saute for a second. I would do this over medium heat. If you can see my knob, because I'm on this electric cooktop that takes a while to warm up, I did turn it up to high until that gets going. Okay, so that is going. Once those saute for a little bit, we'll come back and put our charred leaves into the skillet. So while that is getting sauteed, it looks like I've got another question. Oh, great question, Sue and Kevin. They asked if it's okay to eat the stems of the collards and the kale. Totally fine to eat them. They like using them in smoothies. That's a great way to use them and decrease some of the food waste. There's nothing wrong with eating them. And in fact, you're getting a lot of fiber. They're really fibrous. So if that's a way that you enjoy them, by all means, go right ahead. I find kale stems to be a little bit more tender than the collard stems. So if you're maybe trying to incorporate the stems in a smoothie, maybe start with the kale and work your way up to the collards. But great suggestion, Sue and Kevin. Okay, our onions and our garlic are still getting up to temperature here. So we're gonna shift gears momentarily to our second collard green recipe. Oh, I hear them sizzling. So that's my sign to turn it down. Really important thing when we're in the kitchen is to use all of our senses. Use your ears, use your nose, as much as you can if you're able, because that's going to give you clues as to what's going on with your recipe. And I can hear that starting to sizzle. I can also see the bubbles in the pan, so I know that I'm on my way there. Okay, while that's happening now, we are going to talk about the other recipe that we are going to make with the collards. We're going to do it looks like I got another question. Oh, storing collard greens. Such a good question. I really appreciate these questions you guys are asking because I meant to tell you about that. So storing our collard greens, they are best in a plastic bag. So if you have like you went to a grocery store and you have like that plastic bag from the grocery store, if you just put that over the leaves, stick it in your fridge, they'll keep for about a week or two. If you're getting collard greens from the farmer's market, they're gonna last a little bit longer, again, because they were picked probably that day or the day before than the collard greens you would get on the grocery store shelf because they've already been picked for about a week by the time you get them. So plastic bag in your fridge for about a week. Great question. All right, we're gonna go here to our pan because it looks like onions and garlic are getting soft. Perfect. Okay, so now we are going to add in our collards. So this is 1 pound of collard greens. 1 pound is roughly 1 medium bunch. Okay, I've got 2 cups of vegetable broth. So this is going to help kind of steam and stew these collards. I've got 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. So the tomato paste is going to add some richness, some depth of flavor. That's that umami factor that we've talked about in some of our other classes. So I'm just stirring that to incorporate it. Next, I'm going to, got collard escaping. I have got a half teaspoon of red pepper flakes for a little bit of spice and heat. You can omit those if you don't love that. I've got a half teaspoon of smoked paprika. So oftentimes collards are made with like smoked ham or ham hock or a smoked turkey leg. And to kind of mimic that without having the saturated fat and all of the sodium from those, we're adding some smokiness with the smoked paprika. If you have liquid smoke in your house, you could use a little bit of that in here as well. You could also consider roasting the onions or like grilling the onions, and that'll get you a little bit of that smokiness too. I've got, what do I have? A half teaspoon, 1 tablespoon, excuse me, of maple syrup and a half teaspoon of salt. Okay, I use low sodium broth. If you have regular broth, I would just omit the sodium or the salt. And if you need to reduce your sodium intake for hypertension or heart health reasons, you could just skip that. So that salt, we just added all together. Okay, so I am turning my heat up just a little bit because I want this to simmer. I'm going to put that lid on. We're going to let that just gently simmer while the rest of the class is going on, and we'll check back in about 20 minutes, 20 to 25 minutes on that. Okay, so now that second collard recipe, we're gonna make a wrap. So we're gonna do a curried chickpea salad to go inside of a blanched collard leaf. So this is half of the collard leaf. You saw how I got here in our last recipe. But what we did, instead of rolling it up and thinly slicing it, I put this in boiling water for about 1.5 to 2 minutes. Okay, and then you can see that this is now really pliable and it's bright green. Okay, I don't want to cook it so long that it starts to break apart. I still want it to have enough texture so it's not going to rip when I'm using it as a wrapper. But 1 to 2 minutes in boiling water, and then I put it in an ice bath, which is just a bowl of water with ice in it. Excuse me. And I submerged the blanched leaves in that until they were cool, patted them dry, and now I've got my handy dandy wrapper ready to go. You could do the same thing with Swiss chard leaves. You don't have to blanch them quite as long because they aren't quite as tough as the collards. You could also do the same thing with kale. So any of these dark leafy greens you could use as a wrap alternative. And there's even a whole company here in Southeast Michigan called Breadless that uses all these dark leafy greens as their wrappers for their various sandwiches and burgers. Okay, so for our filling, let's make that together. We've got 2 cans. Oops, let's see, my camera is not wanting to stay put. Bear with me 1 second. Can you come hold this? Sorry, everyone, for the up and down, and hopefully that's not making you seasick. Yeah, thank you so much. I don't know why that's doing that. Okay, all right, so we've got 2 cans of chickpeas that have been drained and rinsed. I'm gonna set those aside, come back to that in a second. We've got 1 avocado, and I like to cut avocados laying it on its side and slicing kind of halfway through the stem end parallel to the cutting board until I feel the pit. And then I press the knife into the pit as I'm twisting the avocado around the knife blade, taking care not to twist my fingers into that knife blade. Okay, and then twist apart like an Oreo. I'm gonna take my knife into my pit and I'm just gonna twist, and there we go. The pit comes out, and now I'm going to scoop the flesh into the bowl here. All right, I'm going to use about, this is a big avocado, so I'm going to use about 2/3 of it here. Okay, so now I am going to mash the chickpeas and the avocado. Does not have to be completely smooth, and depending on the brand of chickpeas you buy, or if you cook them yourself at home, they may or may not mash very well, and that's totally fine. You just want a little bit of mashing so that all the ingredients start to stick together. Okay, so we're getting close. This is one of those recipes that I like. I mean, this filling is one of those recipes that's really nice to make when you don't have a lot of time. It's really fast and easy and very versatile. You can use it as a salad topping. You can use it as a wrap filling like we're doing tonight. I like putting it on a grain bowl as well. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Pretty mashed. I am going to give this a little stir. Okay, so that's about the consistency that we're looking for here. Okay, we've also got a pepper that we're adding. So this is 1 red bell pepper. I'm going to lay it down on its side to dice it. I'm going to slice off the top, slice off the bottom. Okay, set those aside. Those are still good to use. And then I am going to slice the walls of the pepper away from the pith, that's this white part here, and the seeds. So I'm going to try to keep these little pith pieces attached to the core so all the seeds don't get all over the place. I'm going to slice straight down towards the cutting board, turn it, slice down, slice down, slice down, and I've got my squared off pieces here. Throw the seeds into the compost bin. I'm going to stack 2 of those sides on top of each other and make thin matchstick slices. I'm going to gather these together. Then I'm going to cut the opposite direction. Small dice is really what we're going for here. Okay. And again, I'm using the curve of the chef's knife as much as possible to go that rocking motion. Do that again with these. The peppers in here are going to add some nice color and crunch. So a nice textural difference to the soft avocado and the soft chickpeas. Whenever you're putting together a salad, a grain bowl, any type of mixture, think about varying the textures of what you're cooking with. That'll make it more interesting and to your palate, and you're more likely to enjoy the experience of that meal. Okay, so I've got my pepper. It's going in here. And my next ingredient, I've got 2 tablespoons of curry powder. Curry is just a mixture of seasonings. That's what the name means. It doesn't necessarily mean spicy. Most of the curry powders that you're going to find in a general grocery store, like a Meijer or a Kroger, not going to be super spicy. So if you're concerned about it, you can also use spices like turmeric, cumin. We've got some fenugreek typically in here as well, and just play around with different combinations of those. I've got a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, and I have got a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Again, if you are watching your sodium intake, omit the salt. And then we have 2 tablespoons of lime juice. Okay. We're just going to stir that all together. You could add cilantro in here as well. That adds some nice brightness. I skipped it because I love cilantro, but some people think it tastes like soap. And so just showing you a different option. Again, recipes are suggestions, so you can skip the cilantro if you don't want to. You could sub in parsley if you wanted to. That's totally fine. All right, so that's our filling. Oh, I forgot one important ingredient. We've got 1 medium carrot that was shredded. And that carrot is, again, going to add some color, some vitamin A, some crunch, and some sweetness. All right, now we've got our filling. And I've got my wrap here. So I am just going to take a scoop of this filling, place it about 3 inches from one end of the leaf, and leave about 1 inch from the edge. Okay, so I want about 1 inch on either edge, 3 inches from one of the pointy ends. Okay, I'm going to fold up one end, fold over this side. Okay, and then I am just going to roll as I tuck in this edge here. Okay, and you'll have one end that's open like this. Totally fine. That's how these collard wraps usually turn out. And then this is really nice to put on a party platter, to pack into like a bento box for a lunch. Really, really delicious. That way I'll show you one more time. So a little bit of our mixture, fold up one end over and tuck it in, and then fold in the sides on the one end, and roll, roll, roll the opposite direction. Okay, the biggest thing with this is you just don't want to overfill, because then it'll rip and be hard to roll up. But there you go, you've got your collard wraps. Okay. Wonderful. We're going to check in on our other collard recipe before we move on to our second vegetable, fennel. So let's go back to the stovetop here. Ooh, you can see this is bubbling away. I'm going to turn it down just a little bit, but hopefully through the steam over here, you can see the collards are not as bright green. So here's, oh, don't have a raw one anymore. So this is starting to get kind of a dark, more foresty, sagey green. That's what we're looking for. Okay, so I still want to cook that a little bit longer. Like I said, we're aiming for probably about 20, 30 minutes. But starting to look really good. Starting to smell really good. Okay. All right. So let's talk fennel. This is fennel. This is big, beautiful fennel from a local farm here in Ann Arbor. Fennel has like 3 different parts that we can use in our cooking. We've got these gorgeous frilly fronds that kind of look like dill, and we use this fennel like the fennel fronds, just like any other fresh herb. You can use it to garnish a salad or roasted vegetables. It's really yummy that way. We're gonna make a dressing with it, so you can use it for that purpose. It's got a mildly sweet and anise or licorice-like. It's not as intense as a black licorice, but it does have a little bit of that licorice-y sweetness. So we've got the fronds. And then we've got the stalk. This is a little bit woodier, a little bit tougher, but it can be a really great alternative to celery. So if you're making a chickpea salad like we just did, and you like that slightly sweet anise flavor, you could chop up some of the fennel stalks and throw that in your chickpea salad. Also really good in mirepoix, which is just a fancy French name for that carrot, celery, onion kind of saute that's often the base. So those are aromatic veggies that provide a lot of the base note flavors to many different dishes. You could add some chopped up fennel stalks into that mixture and use it as another aromatic vegetable. And then finally, the part that we're going to work with in this recipe is the bulb. Okay. This, depending on how big the fennel is, you might see fennel bulbs that are 2-3 times this size. That's going to determine the tenderness. So typically smaller fennel bulbs are going to be a little bit more tender and best suited for raw applications. And then those larger fennel bulbs may be a little bit on the tougher side and may be better suited for sauteing, braising, grilling, or roasting, which we'll show you a roasting recipe too. Okay, so we want to work with a bulb. How do we get there? We are going to set this wily forest of fennel down on our cutting board, and hopefully my camera will stay put this time. Let's see if we've got the magic. Okay, hopefully you're seeing that. Oh, I do see that I have a question, so let me pop to that real quick. Oh, great question about washing the fennel. Yeah, so I typically look it over to see how dirty it is and then pick out any up. So you'll see like this fennel frond has a little bit of browning. I am gonna pull that off. When I'm selecting the fennel, I want really bright, beautiful fronds and a firm white bulb, not any browning. So I've selected that. I'm going to inspect it for any kind of goopy spots, pull those pieces off, and then give it a nice rinse. You can just rinse the bulb if that's the part that you're working with as well. And typically there shouldn't be too much soil in between these layers. The fennel bulb is usually grows pretty tight, so you should just have to wash the outside layer. But that was a good question. Okay, so now we're going to separate the fronds from the bulb by slicing right here at the stalk. Okay, this is also a good thing to do when you're storing fennel and other kind of root vegetables. Fennel is, this is actually a stem, but any vegetables that have the leafy greens attached that you might use the bottom part, like beets or carrots, separating the tops from the bottom is going to help both of those last longer. So separating the tops for the fennel fronds, putting the fennel fronds in a plastic bag with a paper towel so they don't get too goopy is a good idea. We're going to set those aside for now, and then you could store this separately in another plastic bag in your fridge. And it'll keep, the bulb will keep for a couple weeks. The fronds are usually good for about a week. All right, so I am going to slice off this. This is the end where the roots were connected to the soil. So I'm going to slice that part off. Okay, and then I am going to put that in my compost. I'm going to slice this bulb in half. And for this saute recipe, we are just doing thin slices about a 1/4 inch thick. Okay, so I'm going to keep the tip of my chef's knife on the cutting board. I am going to make thin slices. Some people recommend pouring the fennel. You don't have to do that. I'm going to take this off because that's a little tall for my knife, but I'll come back to it. Depending on the size of your bulb, if you have a smaller bulb like this one is, you typically don't have to core it. And by coring it, I mean this white part right here, this kind of triangular white part, that's the core. Sometimes on the larger fennel bulbs, this can get a little woody. So you would, to core it, set your fennel bulb, the flat part, down on your cutting board. Take the tip of your chef's knife and make about a 45-degree cut, starting at the top of that triangle, slicing down towards your cutting board, and do that on either side of that core. And the core should just pop right out. There you go. Okay. But again, on these smaller bulbs, you don't have to do that. All right, so let's slice this other side. That going. Fennel, outside of having a really lovely, subtle anise flavor, it also has some really beneficial health properties. It's got some compounds like apigenin, which is a compound found in the carrot, celery, parsley family that fennel is a part of, that helps decrease inflammation. So there's this NFK pathway, and that apigenin compound can help kind of turn that off and tamp down our inflammatory response. So, all right, we've got this pile of fennel. We're going to go over here to our skillet. I'm going to turn on my skillet. I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of olive oil. I am going to add 1 medium onion that was nicely diced. I've got a clove of garlic that was minced. And then I am going to add in our fennel. Fennel is just going right in there. And while we get that coming up to temperature, oops, let's see, I've got a bit of our. While that is coming up to temperature, we are going to check in on our collards. Oh yeah, okay. So I can really see the change in color. Can you notice how different that color is? So almost all of the collards greens are now that kind of darker, more sagey green. Okay. So still gonna let that go for a few more minutes. Doesn't hurt to cook them a little bit longer. And we are going to give our veggies over here a quick little stir. So again, because I'm on an electric stovetop that takes a minute to heat up, I've got this turned up to high. You would want to use like medium-high heat. Okay, while that's going on, we are going to talk about slicing our kale. So this recipe calls for using about a bunch of lacinato kale, and we've got it finely sliced right here. You can see. So I want to show you how I got there. I am using the stems. I'm not going to take these stems out because these stems are actually pretty tender and will add a nice texture to this saute. So to get to this right here, I am going to start by gathering my leaves together. I'm going to trim off the ends where the leaves kind of connected to the rest of the kale plant. Usually those are a little bit dried out. And then I'm just going to make these nice kind of rocking motion with my chef's knife. And I'm making cuts that are about a 1/4 inch apart. Again, this is a really tender kale. It cooks pretty quickly, but making these small cuts is going to make it cook even faster. And you can see as the leaf starts to get a little bit bigger, I'm doing that rolling motion like we did with the collards. And that's going to help us get all the leaves. And also notice when I'm cutting with this knife, I'm trying to slice in this portion of the knife. That's kind of what's called the sweet spot of our chef's knife. So that's where I'm aiming to do most of my slicing, dicing, chopping. All right, so we've got our pile of kale. That's going in here. I can hear our veggies starting to sizzle a little bit. We're going to let that go for a couple minutes, and then we'll come back and add our remaining ingredients. While that is happening, I want to talk about roasting fennel. So sauteing and roasting the fennel, cooking it, is really going to decrease the intensity of that anise or like licorice-y flavor. So if that is something you don't have a taste for, then cooking the fennel is going to help minimize that, still maintain some of the sweetness, and give you a really interesting texture addition to whatever it is that you're making. So we're sauteing it on the stove top, and I'm going to show you how we roast it. Okay. So to roast it, first we want to get it into a good size. So I'm going to do pretty much what I did with the saute, slice off that root to end. This leaf is a little dried out, so I'm going to take that off there. Slice the bulb in half lengthwise here. Put those cut sides down on the cutting board. This is a more stable surface. It's not going to roll away on me. And then I'm going to make thin slices, again, about that 1/4 inch thickness, okay? And it's okay that I'm using a little bit of the stalks as well. I hear the onions and okay, so this is starting to cook really well. I'm going to turn my temperature down to medium. I can really smell that garlic. When we're sauteing, especially with garlic, we just want to make sure we don't burn it because then it gets a little bitter. Okay, so and I realized I am not showing you what I'm cutting. That might be helpful. Can you hold it again? Sorry. Well, good thing there's another half of a fennel bulb so that you can see what we're doing. Okay, I apologize for that. So I sliced my fennel bulb. I trimmed off the root ends. I sliced the fennel bulb in half lengthwise. And now I'm putting that cut side down on the cutting board because it's a stable surface. I'm taking the tip of my chef's knife on the cutting board and I'm making thin slices about a 1/4 inch thick. And we're just going to do that all the way up this bulb. Okay. And we're going to use a little bit of the stalks. That's okay. They're being roasted. So for more hardy vegetables, roasting is a really great application. So think of like your root vegetables, like your beets and your carrots and your celeriac or rutabaga. You can use the fennel in a similar way. Okay, so now we want to add some flavor. We're going to add 2 tablespoons of white wine vinegar. You could use apple cider vinegar as well. I've got 2 tablespoons of avocado oil. I'm using avocado oil because it is a higher temperature tolerant oil, and we're going to roast at 400 degrees olive oil would go beyond its smoke point at 400. So anything above 350 degrees, use avocado oil. I've got a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, a 1/4 teaspoon of thyme, dried thyme, and a 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder. You could use 1 clove of minced garlic here if that's your preference. I'm just going to give that a toss in this bowl here. And then I am going to add this to my pan, spread that out evenly, and then this goes into a 400-degree oven for about 10 to 15 minutes until these fronds are really soft. Or not the fronds, excuse me, this is the bulb, until the bulb is really soft. And then you'll get, voila, something like this. Just beautiful and delicious, mildly sweet, really nice, lovely texture, great, great side dish. Okay, set that aside. We're gonna go over to the stove for 1 second, give this a nice little stir. Got some browning. Okay, now we're gonna add in our remaining ingredients. We've got 1 can of drained and rinsed chickpeas. We've got that bunch of kale that we chopped. And we've got 2 tablespoons of za'atar seasoning, which is a Middle Eastern seasoning that usually has sumac and some sesame seeds in there. We've got some, stir that around. Notice that I'm using tongs here as well. So when I'm working with leafy greens, I like to use tongs because the greens can be a little unwieldy when we're using a spatula. The tongs can be really helpful here. Okay. And I am going to borrow just a touch of water. I'm going to add a couple tablespoons of water here to help with some steaming and speed up our cooking. And I'm going to borrow the lid from our collard. I know it doesn't quite fit, but it's going to help a little bit. All right. I'm going to set aside our lemon juice for some finishing. While that is going and finishing its cooking, we are going to do our last recipe, and we're going to finish on time. That's my goal. All right. So I have got a food processor here. Hopefully you're all seeing that all right. We are going to plug this in. I told you we could use the fennel fronds as a herb, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to make a green goddess dressing. This is a dressing that's really versatile. You can use almost any soft herb in this application. I've got a 1/4 cup of fennel fronds. It's going in here. I've got 1 cup of packed basil. I've got a 1/2 cup of parsley. And I'm using the stems and the leaves on the parsley and the basil. I have got some green onions. So I've got about 5 green onions. I'm using both the greens and the whites. Okay. Other herbs you could use here, chives, cilantro, tarragon, mint, all those would be great. I've got 2 tablespoons of olive oil, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast for a little bit of kind of cheesiness and savoriness. And then I've got 1 cup of silken tofu. So a lot of green goddess dressing recipes will call for using yogurt or a sour cream. This gives us a plant-based option. We're getting some plant-based phytoestrogens and isoflavones that are great for heart health and cancer risk reduction. And this is going to provide some creaminess, smoothness as well. And then I've got a lemon. So I've got my lemon here. I want to zest this lemon, which means to remove the skin. So I just want to get the yellow part, not too much of the white. So I'm just going to go, this is a microplane. You could use the side of a box grater to the smallest setting on a box grater. And I'm just going to gently go over all the way around this lemon. Just trying, so you see how there's a little bit of color still there. I'm not going all the way down to the white. That's what I want. If we get too much of the white pith part of the rind, it becomes a little bitter. So we just want the sweet, zesty pop of flavor from the outer rind. This is an application where you might want to use an organic lemon, just because you are eating that outside piece. Okay, that's pretty good. Getting that in there. Again, that's adding some brightness and a nice pop of flavor. I'm going to slice my lemon in half, and then I'm going to juice it into here. So this is my juicing tool right here. And I've got my cut lemon. I'm going to press the cut side down, which is kind of counterintuitive, but that's how these guys work. Juice that into here. I like to kind of turn because sometimes some of the juice is in there. Set that aside. Juice the other side. All right. Oh, this lemon smells, the zest smells so good. Okay. So I'm going to check on our saute real quick. Right. And give this a nice little stir. All right, that's looking pretty good. See how that kale is nice and bright green? That's what I'm going for. Just a few more minutes and that will be done. Okay, back to our green goddess. Right, I'm gonna pulse this. Give this a stir real quick. You can see how nice and creamy this is, and I'm just gonna blend this a little bit more. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So there you go. You've got your green goddess dressing. Right, nice and bright. This is really wonderful for putting on pasta and making like a spring or summer really fresh pasta salad. You could use it as a salad dressing. You might need to thin it out with a little bit more lemon juice or a little bit of water. You could also use it as a dip for veggies. It's really nice for that application. All right, or you can also use it as a topping for a grain bowl. Got that going on. All right, we are got 2 minutes, and we've got our final dishes to finish off. So we are going to go back to the stove top for 1 second. Turn everything off. Show you. Okay. I turned off the heat on my saute here, and I'm just going to finish with a couple tablespoons of fresh lemon juice. That is adding some brightness, a little bit of zing. Oftentimes when a recipe feels kind of flat, adding a little bit of citrus or vinegar can help really round it out and bring it home. All right, so to show you what these look like, I'm going to show you, this is some creamy grits. I'll put that recipe on the website, plant-based cheesy grits. I've got my kale and fennel saute on one side. And on the other side, I am going to take our beautiful, luscious, smoky, savory collard greens on the other. So you could, when you're making either of these recipes, put them on top of some grits. You could put them on top of a whole grain pasta or a brown rice or whatever your favorite whole grain is. We've got some chickpeas in this saute for some protein. Our collard greens go really well with black-eyed peas, pigeon peas, lentils. Those could be a great pairing. for here, or some smoky tempeh tofu. But there you go. You've got your final sauteed recipes. We are right at time. I am going to share my slides for 1 second because I do want to let you all know about another class that we have coming up. We got a whole host of lifestyle medicine classes, and one of those class series is focused on menopause, and that class series actually is starting this coming Monday night at 5:30 p.m. It's a 5-week class series. It is billed to insurance, so unlike this class that is free, that is a class that you want to check with your insurance to see if they cover medical nutrition therapy. That class covers all 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine, not just nutrition. And it's really designed to give folks the skills and practical application tools to thrive during the menopause transition and well beyond that time period. There's a lot of myth busting that's embedded into the class, and it's really designed to be a supportive group learning environment. If that's something that sounds interesting to you, you can call that number that you see on the slide here, 734-712-7451, and that's how you would get registered. I know we have folks who are joining us from all across the country. Unfortunately, this class is only available to folks who are in the state of Michigan. Anybody anywhere in Michigan can join this class. We hope to have classes available in the future for beyond Michigan, but right now this class is just for Michigan participants. Again, if you have any questions, you can also always email that lifestylemedicine@trinity-health email address. So with that, I will let you all get back to enjoying your lovely summer evening. Thanks so much for spending time with me tonight in the kitchen. I'm excited to hear from you. If you make any of these recipes, if you try fennel or collards in a different way, would love to hear that too. Your feedback is always appreciated and welcome. Take good care and happy cooking.